Lie down tonight the way you always do. Put your head on your pillow. Feel how it pushes your skull forward, how your chin tilts towards your chest, how the back of your neck compresses into a curve it was never meant to hold for 8 hours. You will fall asleep like that. You will stay like that for most of the night. And while you are unconscious, unable to feel what is happening, your pillow will be doing something to the 7 bones in your neck that I documented 500 years ago, when I opened the throat of a dead man in Florence, and saw for the first time how fragile and how perfectly balanced the human cervical spine actually is. What I found in that body, what I drew by candlelight with ink on paper that still exists today, is the answer to why your neck hurts every morning. And the answer is not what any doctor has told you. I dissected the necks of over a dozen cadavers during my years of anatomical study. The neck fascinated me because it is the single point of failure in the entire human structure. Everything that keeps you alive passes through the neck. The spinal cord carrying every signal between your brain and your body. The carotid arteries carrying blood to your brain. The jugular veins returning it. The trachea carrying air to your lungs. The esophagus carrying food to your stomach. The vagus nerve controlling your heart rate and your digestion. All of it compressed into a column roughly the width of your fist, supported by 7 small bones stacked on top of each other, held together by ligaments and controlled by some of the smallest, most precise muscles in the entire body. I drew all of it, every layer, every structure, and what I saw was a system designed with almost no margin for error. The 7 bones. The cervical vertebrae, the 7 bones of your neck, are the smallest vertebrae in your entire spine. They have to be. If they were larger, you could not turn your head. If they were heavier, the muscles holding your skull upright would fatigue within minutes. Every gram of bone in your neck represents a trade-off between structural strength and range of motion. Evolution chose motion. It chose a neck that could rotate nearly 180 degrees, tilt forward and backward, bend side to side, and make the hundreds of micro-adjustments per second needed to keep your eyes level while your body moves through space. It chose this at the expense of durability. But before I describe the bones, I want you to understand what passes between them. I dissected the neck layer by layer from skin to spine, and what I found between the muscles and the vertebrae was a density of critical structures that made me hold my breath. The vertebral arteries, 2 slender vessels that thread upward through small holes in the transverse processes of each cervical vertebra, carrying roughly 20% of the blood supply to your brain. These arteries do not travel in a straight line. They zigzag through the bony tunnels, making sharp turns at each vertebral level. When you turn your head, these arteries are stretched on one side and compressed on the other. In a young, healthy neck, this is fine. The arteries are flexible. They accommodate the movement. But in a neck where the vertebrae have shifted, where bone spurs have grown into the transverse foramina, where years of abnormal positioning have altered the alignment, these arteries can be kinked, partially occluded, and the blood flow to the back of your brain, to the cerebellum and the brainstem, the regions controlling your balance, your coordination, your consciousness, can be reduced. I drew these arteries threading through the vertebrae. I traced their path from the subclavian artery at the base of the neck to the basilar artery at the base of the skull. I documented every turn, every passage through bone, and I understood, even with the limited knowledge of circulation available in my time, that these vessels were vulnerable, that anything disrupting the alignment of the cervical vertebrae would disrupt the vessels passing through them. I drew the first and second cervical vertebrae with particular care because they are unlike any other bones in the spine. The atlas, the first vertebra, named after the Greek Titan who held the world on his shoulders, is a ring of bone with no body. It is open in the centre. Your skull sits on top of it, balanced on 2 smooth concave surfaces, called the superior articular facets. This is the joint that allows you to nod, yes and no. The most basic human gesture operates through a bone I drew in 1510 that looks nothing like the vertebrae below it. The axis, the second vertebra, has a bony peg called the dens, that projects upward through the ring of the atlas. The atlas rotates around this peg. This is the joint that allows you to turn your head left and right. When you shake your head no, you are rotating the atlas around the dens of the axis. The dens is held in place against the inside of the atlas by a single ligament called the transverse ligament. If that ligament fails, if the dens shifts backward even a few millimeters, it compresses the spinal cord. Paralysis, death. A single ligament, a few centimeters long, is the only thing preventing the weight of your rotating skull from crushing the nerve bundle that controls your entire body. I drew this ligament. I drew the dens. I drew the relationship between the atlas and the axis with an accuracy that anatomists would not improve upon for 3 centuries. And I understood even then that this structure was built on a knife edge. Maximum function, minimum margin. What your pillow does at 2 a.m. Now put your head on a pillow. A standard pillow, the kind most people use, is roughly 4 to 6 inches thick when compressed under the weight of a head. If you sleep on your back, that pillow pushes your head forward. Your chin drops towards your chest. The natural lordotic curve of your cervical spine, the gentle inward curve that I documented in my anatomical drawings, is reversed. Instead of curving inward, your neck is forced into flexion. The front of each cervical disc is compressed. The back of each disc is stretched. The ligaments along the back of your spine are pulled taut. The small facet joints where each vertebra articulates with the one below it are opened beyond their neutral position. This is not a resting position. This is a loaded position. Your neck is under mechanical stress, and you are holding this stress for 6, 7, 8 hours while you sleep, while your muscles are relaxed, while the structures that normally protect the spine during waking hours are offline. If you sleep on your side, which most people do for at least part of the night, the pillow creates a different problem. If it is too thin, your head drops towards the mattress and your neck bends laterally, compressing the structures on the lower side and stretching the structures on the upper side. If it is too thick, your head is pushed upward and the lateral bend goes the other way. In either case, the cervical spine is held in a position of asymmetric loading for hours. The muscles on one side are shortened and compressed. The muscles on the other side are lengthened and strained. The facet joints on the compressed side are jammed together. The facet joints on the stretched side are gapped open. And then you wake up, and your neck hurts, and you think you slept wrong. You did not sleep wrong. You slept exactly the way your pillow forced you to sleep. The pillow determined the position determined the load determined the damage. Every single night. The disc that cannot heal. Between each pair of cervical vertebrae sits an intervertebral disc. I dissected these discs carefully and drew their internal structure. Each disc has 2 parts. The annulus fibrosus, a tough ring of layered fibers arranged in alternating diagonal patterns, like the plies of a radial tire, and the nucleus pulposus, a gel-like core that distributes compressive force evenly across the disc. When you are young, the nucleus is approximately 80% water. It is plump. It is pressurized. It acts as a hydraulic cushion, absorbing shock and allowing the vertebrae above and below to tilt and rotate smoothly. I noticed in my dissections that the discs in older cadavers were different. They were thinner, drier. The boundary between the nucleus and the annulus was less distinct. In the oldest bodies I examined, the nucleus was barely distinguishable from the surrounding ring. It had lost its gel-like quality. It had become fibrous and stiff. I drew this difference. I documented it. I did not know the molecular mechanism, but I saw the result clearly enough to record it. What is happening is this. The intervertebral disc, like the cartilage in the knee, has no direct blood supply in adults. It is the largest avascular structure in the human body. Nutrients reach the disc cells by diffusion through the end plates of the vertebrae above and below. Waste products leave by the same route. This diffusion is driven by mechanical loading and unloading, the same pump mechanism that feeds articular cartilage. When you move, when you change position, when you compress and decompress the disc through normal activity, fluid moves in and out, carrying nutrients and removing waste. When you lie still for 8 hours with your neck held in a fixed, flexed position by a pillow, the diffusion stops on the compressed side of the disc. The cells on the front of the disc, where the flexion concentrates the load, are squeezed. The fluid is pushed out.
Nutrients cannot reach them. Waste accumulates. The cells on the back of the disc, where the flexion creates tension, are stretched beyond their normal range. The annular fibers are strained. Micro tears form in the layered structure, not large enough to cause a herniation, not yet, but enough to weaken the structure incrementally, night after night, year after year. By morning, when you stand up, the compressed discs in your neck rehydrate. They draw fluid back in over the first hour or two of the day. This is why you are actually measurably taller in the morning than at night, roughly 1 to 2 centimeters taller, because your discs are plumper after a night of reduced gravitational loading. But if the night was spent in forced flexion, the rehydration is uneven. The damaged side of the annulus absorbs fluid differently than the intact side. The disc does not return to its symmetric shape. Over months and years, the disc develops a permanent asymmetry.
It bulges where the annulus is weakest. It thins where the compression was greatest. And one morning, after thousands of nights of the same pattern, you turn your head and feel something shift. Something that does not go back. That is the disc finally giving way along the fault line your pillow has been creating since you were 20 years old. The nerves I traced. I was one of the first anatomists to trace the path of nerves from the spinal cord to the periphery of the body. I followed the cervical nerve roots as they exited the spinal column through small openings called the intervertebral foramina. These openings are formed by notches in the edges of adjacent vertebrae. When the vertebrae are properly aligned and the disc between them is full height, the foramen is open. The nerve passes through with room to spare. When the disc thins, the foramen narrows. When the facet joints, stressed by years of abnormal loading during sleep, develop bone spurs, the foramen narrows further. When the bulging disc protrudes into the foramen from the front, while the bone spur encroaches from the back, the nerve is caught between them, compressed, irritated, inflamed. The cervical nerves that exit between the 5th, 6th and 7th vertebrae, C5, C6 and C7, supply the muscles and skin of your shoulders, arms and hands. When these nerves are compressed, you do not just feel pain in your neck. You feel pain radiating down your arm, numbness in your fingers, weakness in your grip, tingling that wakes you at 3 in the morning and will not stop until you shake your hand and change position. This is cervical radiculopathy, and it is one of the most common neurological complaints in adults over 50. I traced these nerves. I drew their paths from the spine to the fingertips. I mapped the muscles they controlled and the skin they supplied. 500 years ago, I documented the exact anatomy that explains why a problem in your neck creates symptoms in your hand, and the connection between pillow and fingertip, between the position your head is held in while you sleep and the numbness you feel when you wake, runs through the exact structures I drew in my notebooks in Milan. The muscle that forgets how to release. There is another mechanism operating every night, and this one involves the muscles themselves. The deep cervical flexor muscles, small muscles at the front of your neck that stabilize the cervical spine and control the position of your head, are designed to work in precise coordination with the larger superficial muscles. The deep muscles handle fine control. The superficial muscles, particularly the sternocleidomastoid and the upper trapezius, handle large movements and heavy loads. When your neck is held in sustained flexion by a pillow, the deep flexors are shortened and compressed for hours. They are not actively contracting during sleep, but they are held in a shortened position. Over time, over thousands of nights, these muscles adapt to the shortened length. They lose their ability to lengthen fully. Their resting tone increases. They become chronically tight. Meanwhile, the deep extensor muscles at the back of the neck, the muscles responsible for maintaining the lordotic curve and supporting the weight of the skull in an upright position, are stretched for hours every night. They adapt in the opposite direction. They become lengthened, weakened. Their resting tone decreases. They lose their ability to hold the head in proper alignment during the day. This imbalance between the front and back of the neck is called upper crossed syndrome in modern clinical terminology, and it creates a self-reinforcing cycle. The tight front muscles pull the head forward. The weak back muscles cannot pull it back. During the day, you walk around with your head displaced forward of your centre of gravity. Your chin juts out. Your upper back rounds. The muscles at the base of your skull, the suboccipital muscles, tighten to tilt your eyes up to the horizon, because your brain demands a level visual field regardless of what your posture is doing. These suboccipital muscles are some of the most densely innervated muscles in the human body. They contain more proprioceptive receptors per gram than any other muscle. When they are chronically tightened, they produce headaches. Tension headaches that start at the base of the skull and radiate over the top of the head to the forehead. Headaches that begin in the morning and ease as the day goes on. Headaches that you treat with medication when the actual cause is a postural distortion that begins on your pillow every single night. I drew the suboccipital muscles. I drew the layers of muscle at the back of the neck from the deepest to the most superficial. I showed their attachments to the skull, to the atlas, to the axis. I documented the architecture of a system designed for exquisite balance and control. And that system is being distorted for a third of every day by an object you put under your head without thinking about it. What I found in the old man's neck. Late in my anatomical career, I dissected the body of an old man who had claimed to be over 100 years old. I documented the experience in my notebooks. His body was remarkably preserved, thin but intact. And when I opened his neck, I saw something I had not seen to the same degree in younger cadavers. The discs were nearly gone. The spaces between the vertebrae that should have been occupied by plump hydraulic cushions were collapsed. Bone was touching bone in some places, and the bone surfaces where they contacted were polished smooth, eburnated, worn by years of direct friction the way a river stone is smoothed by water. The foramina were narrowed by spurs of bone growing from the edges of the vertebrae, encroaching on the spaces where the nerves exited. The ligaments along the back of the spine were thickened and calcified, stiff where they should have been supple. I drew all of this. I drew the collapsed discs on the bone spurs on the narrowed foramina. I did not know what had caused the changes. I assumed it was simply the passage of time. But now you know what I did not. The passage of time alone does not collapse a disc. Load collapses a disc. Sustained, asymmetric, unphysiological load applied for hours every night to a structure that cannot repair itself and was never designed to be held in flexion while its owner sleeps on a device that did not exist for most of human history. Your ancestors slept on the ground, on packed earth, on animal skins laid over grass, on surfaces that allowed the head to rest in a neutral position, aligned with the spine. There was no elevation, no forced flexion, no pillow pushing the skull forward for 8 hours. The cervical spine rested in its natural curve, the discs decompressed evenly, the muscles maintained their balance, the nerves passed through open foramina without compression. You sleep on a pillow because it feels comfortable, and it does feel comfortable initially because the pillow supports the weight of your head and takes the load off the neck muscles. But comfort and biomechanical health are not the same thing. Comfort is a sensation. Biomechanical health is a structural condition. And the sensation of comfort is masking a structural deterioration that you will not feel until the damage crosses the threshold of pain, which in the cervical spine can take decades. I spent my life drawing the human body because I believed that seeing it clearly was the first step to understanding it. I drew every muscle and every bone and every nerve in the neck, because the neck is where everything converges, where the most vital structures in the body pass through the narrowest space, supported by the smallest bones, controlled by the most precise muscles. And what I would tell you now, if I could reach across 500 years and speak to you directly, is this. Look at your pillow the way I looked at the cadavers on my table. Not with comfort in mind, with structure, with physics, with the understanding that every force applied to the body produces a response, and that a force applied for 8 hours every night for 40 years is not a small force. It is one of the largest sustained loads your cervical spine will ever bear, and it is shaping your neck right now, tonight, in exactly the way I saw it shaped in every old body I ever opened. I will tell you what I wish someone had told the old man whose neck I dissected. The damage is cumulative, but it is not instantaneous. It took decades to collapse those discs. It took decades to grow those bone spurs. It took decades for the foramina to narrow to the point where the nerves were trapped. Which means that every night you change the position. Every night you reduce the flexion. Every night you allow the cervical spine to rest in something closer to its natural alignment. You are slowing the process. You are not reversing it. The disc material that is already lost will not return. The annular tears that have already formed will not heal. But the rate of accumulation can be changed. The physics does not care about your past. It only cares about the forces acting on the structure right now. I spent my life trying to understand how things work. Not how they should work, not how we wish they worked. How they actually work in the real physical world, under real forces, with real materials. And the human neck works beautifully when it is loaded the way it evolved to be loaded. It fails predictably when it is loaded differently. Your pillow loads it differently, every single night. And the morning pain, the stiffness, the headaches, the tingling in your fingers, these are not mysteries. They are not random. They are the precise mechanical consequences of a specific sustained force applied to a specific biological structure for a specific duration. I drew the structure. I documented its fragility. I mapped the nerves and the vessels and the muscles and the bones. And now, 500 years later, the structure has not changed. The fragility has not changed. The only thing that has changed is that you have added a pillow, and the pillow has added the force. And the force is writing its signature on your cervical spine, in exactly the language I learned to read in the basements of Florence.